Greetings, one and all, to the most cursed, most cringiest corner of the internet. A YouTube channel content creator actively alienating everyone in both the analog and digital world. Well, welcome and good evening, you wonderful dice of all alignments. I am Lunar D8, and we're reading Umineko. On the other hand, Shibata Katsui failed at this. The enemy Uezeji learned of Nobuyuki's death, so Shibata had to deal with an unexpected counterattack and got slowed down. That's why later on he suffered a great loss against Hideyoshi in the fight for the succession. Hideyoshi, who had a strong fascination with the commanders of the Sengoku period, would always show off his knowledge when he got the chance. Wincing slightly, Ava made him get back to his point. So basically, the whole time since last year's family conference, I felt as though something was strange. You mean the time when Rudolph and I were talking about the inheritance, and Father overheard us from the hall? That's just it. Natsui and the servants kept saying Father was here or there, and that he seemed to be in a bad mood. But not a single one of us relatives saw Father, right? If what you're thinking is right, what does that mean? Does it mean Nissan's trying to keep all of the inheritance for himself? Of course, hiding someone's death is a very dangerous thing to do, and all things considered, I'm not sure Kraus-san would be willing to do it just to have the inheritance to himself. But it is possible. Well, it's true that Nissan has always been greedy. He's always used to take things that were meant for all of the siblings, keeping them all for himself. Kraus-san is supposed to be the richest of the siblings. Kraus-san's scheming to keep the inheritance all to himself to the point of accepting the risk of hiding Father's death sounds a tad unbelievable to me. Even so, last year's family conference was so strange I can't help but wonder. Ava and the others were painfully aware of how reckless it would be to try to see Kenzo when he was in a bad mood. So during last year's family conference, once they heard about Kenzo getting into a terrible mood, they never made an attempt to contact him. That was why, to this very day, they hadn't found it suspicious that Kenzo had never appeared. It certainly is worth suspecting, but I wonder if Nissan really would do something as appalling as hiding Father's death. For all his pride, that man has a coward's side to him. Would he really make such a once-in-a-lifetime bet? Either way, it'd probably be a good idea to make sure we get a chance to meet with Father during this year's conference. The rumors are really bad. Sounds like Aniki's business is failing even worse than we'd imagined. Like he's taken massive losses and he's giving it all he's got just to try and cover it up. That'll make it very difficult to borrow money from him. Yeah, I could cry. Wouldn't be in a financial stress also weaken Kraus-san's position in certain ways. Weaken his position, while investors tend to have a keen eye. If they hear that he's actually low on funds, they won't want to have anything to do with him. I guess trust is the most important part of that business. I still say she looks like Ivy from Soul Calibur 2 for the PS2. Also like Kaoru Nagisa. Kaoru from Evangelion, the anime. Also kinda looks like Sare, the VTuber. Either way, Kairi. Very pretty. But like I said, she looks like Ivy from Soul Calibur. Staring right at her boobs. Kairi smiled thinly. Rudolph was taken aback by that smile. He'd figured that his plan, which involved raising money to get him out of his current mess by borrowing from the affluent Kraus would all come to nothing now that they knew Kraus himself was in financial trouble. Confidence in Kraus-san's abilities might be a requirement for his own businesses in the future, but it isn't necessary for our future. Are you suggesting that I blackmail him? I wouldn't want to if it were me. For one blood sibling to take another one down is no laughing matter. Giggle. Rudolph felt a shiver go up his spine at Kyrie's cold smile. At times, Kyrie was able to throw away all compassion and think in an extremely ruthless manner. Whenever he saw that, Rudolph knew he'd never like to have her as his enemy. I'd rather not threaten Oni-san if we had any other way to get money. If there were another way, we wouldn't be worrying. Don't you think it is a bit pathetic to waste time worrying about a problem when you have no other options? Rudolph stopped talking, folded his arms, and lowered his gaze. He still felt some of the terror he'd experienced thanks to Kraus's violence when they were young, and now that same Kraus was the one he needed to threaten. Rudolph would also be fighting against his childhood trauma, so to give her husband a little push, Kyrie smiled reassuringly, and perhaps coldly. I've never been a fan of doing work based on trust. It takes hard work to build up trust, but only an instant to lose it. There's no less profitable investment. Yeah, you're right. All the trust in the world isn't worth a good banknote. Even though Kraus-san has been taking on massive losses, he ought to be capable of gathering enough money to buy us some time. Of course, he'd probably be forced to cash in all the trust he's built up so far. This is gonna get ugly. We'll have to prepare sufficiently. We haven't been given any time or room for failure. Isn't that right? Among my Kyoto friends, I know a few who are talented at this sort of investigation. I'd rather not be indebted to people like that, but you do want to try meeting them? But do you want to try meeting them? You can't expect people like that to offer you receipts, but I'm sure they'll dig up something that makes them worth the investment. Yes, Maria's doing well too. That's none of your business, thank you. Huh? Well, I'll have to look at my schedule. Rosa was talking to Rudolph over the phone. Rosa rarely received calls from her older siblings, so she braced herself for something serious. Well, truth is, I want to have a little talk about the next family conference without Nikki. Between you, me, and Eva Ne-san sounds like a headache. I can't go into details over the phone, but I think you'll find it worth listening to. Something good. Of course, Aneke's all for it. Ne-san is. All we want is your approval. We aren't going to ask you for money or anything like that. The most important thing is that the three of us stick together. Got it? Rosa let out a sigh. She did so because in the past when Rudolph and Eva got into a fight with Kraus, they always used to talk to her like this right before dragging her into it. First, tell me. I stand to gain something too, yes? Yep, the three of us will each grab 200 million out of this. If all goes well, we might be able to squeeze out more. That should be enough to handle your debt, right? And when can we expect to grab this by? Of course, it'll be within a year. I need it. Aneke needs it, and you need it too, Rosa. All three of our problems will be settled, so the chances of success are good enough that Ne-san's agreed to it. Now, do you want to hear? I know it's a bit sudden, but let's meet next Sunday, 19 o'clock, at the coffee shop you like in Ginza. That's the only time Aneka is scheduled in a mind match. Any problems? If we're talking 200 million, I'll have no choice but to listen. Then let's meet at 7 p.m. next Sunday at Leopold's. And Maria Chen, you can bring her too if you want. Don't talk about money in front of that child. She set the receiver down the clunk a little violently. Apparently either Ava or Rudolph had gotten a hold of one of Krauss's weak points. They would probably threaten him with that at the next family conference and force him to pay up. Even before hearing the details, she knew full well that it would be nothing good. But even so, this might be her once-in-a-lifetime chance to pay back her large debts. Rosa took a notebook out of her handbag and started to mark the day she'd be meeting with Rudolph and Ava. Then she frowned and smacked herself hard in the forehead, because written there was DZL with Maria. Something she had planned to do with her daughter. Maria was in her room playing around excitedly with Sakutaro and the others. That was because she was going to that recently built amusement park, Disneyland, the following Sunday. Looking at the clock, Rosa saw that it was just past 9 o'clock at night. Maria was breaking the lights out rule. After covering her face and agonizing for a while, Rosa stood up and stomped over to Maria's room. The room would probably be a mess as well, at least tonight. That was convenient. As she stood outside the door to Maria's room, listening to the happy laughter seeping through, Rosa's face twisted in anguish once again, and she looked at the floor. Then, when she raised her head again, her brow was furrowed and her face had become an ugly expression of anger. It's like, oh, your room's a mess, and it's messy, and you're up past 9 o'clock. Guess what? I'm canceling your trip to Disney World next Sunday and I'm going to do it while yelling at you and being angry. The weather wasn't great. According to the weekend forecast, a certain tropical cyclone would likely grow into a large typhoon. If unhappy premonitions tend to be right, this year's family conference will probably take place in absolutely horrible weather. No, I wish a typhoon large enough to stop all boat travel would seal Rakanjima away forever. If that happened, I'd be able to hide Kenzo's death as long as I wanted. If only the typhoon would keep them at bay forever. Natsui let out a deep sigh. Just doing that made her headache throb. As the day of the family conference approached, the intensity of her headache just kept on increasing. At that time, the phone rang. Natsui turned the TV off and picked up the receiver. Hello? I apologize for calling during your rest. It is Genji. Is something the matter? There is a phone call for you from the external line. However, they will not state their name. They aren't saying their name? Yes. The person in question said you would know when you spoke with them. What should be done? It might be a prank. What did they sound like? I believe it was a young man. Any idea who it might be? A young man? Natsui didn't have a clue who that might be. In the first place, there was no one amongst her acquaintances who would do something as rude as refusing to state their name. And on top of that, a young man. As a wife, she must avoid any contact that might be considered suspicious with anyone other than her husband, much less a young man. As soon as she thought this, the phone call suddenly seemed like something dirty. But despite that, she also wanted to know what they wanted to tell her. Could it be some kind of trouble related to Krauss's business? What if there was some particular reason they needed to talk to Krauss's wife instead of Krauss directly? No matter what it is, it's my duty as a wife to listen and report to Krauss. If it's some bizarre threat, I just have to firmly refuse and inform Krauss that I received such a phone call. If it's something offensive, I just have to tell Genji to never send me anonymous calls again. As Natsui thought this, just as Genji was suggesting that he hang up on the man as though that's what she'd naturally choose, she told him to connect her to this person. She then set the receiver down. After a short while, the phone rang. Hello? This wasn't the internal line. It was the external phone line, which Genji had redirected to her, so it should already have connected directly with the mysterious man. However, the person on the other end didn't respond. Not liking this at all, Natsui spoke one more time, sounding displeased. Hello? Who is this? Tell me your name. She heard something that sounded like a sigh. She gulped reflexively. After remaining silent for a little longer, the man finally answered. It's been a long time, huh? That was the first time the man had spoken. Just how long has it been? How many years? What are you talking about? Who are you? The voice certainly did sound like a young man's, but it's hard to learn much about someone just by their voice over the phone. It sounded like a young man, but it might actually be a middle-aged schoolboy, or a man in his prime who still had a youngish voice. No, wait. It might be too soon to be sure this is even a male. However, one thing was certain. Natsui could think of no one who would speak to her in an overly familiar manner like this. It'd be easy for you to tell me my name, but that would make me very sad. I don't know what you're talking about. Who are you, and what business do you have with me? If you can't tell me that, I'm not interested. I'm hanging up. What I want is for you to remember. And what is it that you are telling me to remember? I don't know you, so I have nothing to remember. Please do not say that. I am your child, am I not? What did you say? What are you talking about? Do not say things that will make me so sad, mother. That unsettling word thrust itself mercilessly into the depths of Natsui's heart and started churning it about. In her entire life, Natsui had never been told something so unsettling. In her bewilderment, Natsui felt her heart beat so loudly that it felt like it would explode. I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what you're planning, but I'm hanging up. I came back for revenge. Revenge for your crime of 19 years ago. Natsui's mind went blank, and from beyond the wind, howling outside the window, she most certainly heard the roar of the sea from that day. So, you actually do remember, do you not? I told you, I don't know what you're talking about, and never call here again. I have not forgotten how you treated me 19 years ago. To curse you, I still call you mother despite that. No, because of that. The family conference will be very soon, right? I am your son, mother. I will come on the day of the conference, after 19 years, so that I can have my revenge on you. Click. Breathing so hard her shoulders heaved, Natsui slammed the receiver down and hung up. Then she hit the phone violently, knocking the receiver off, so that no more calls would come through it. I can hear the roar of the sea. The voice I hear from beyond the howling wind is certainly even if I cover my ears, the headache won't. Completely pale, Natsui kept shivering as though cold. Lambda? Are you there? Yes, I'm here. I'm anywhere you want me to be, Burn. Then crawl into the cupboard under the kitchen floor, or in a jar of rice bran paste if you like. Oh, you're gonna dip me in bean paste and bite into me?